everyone, I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're gonna glaze sock blanks, we're gonna glaze yarn, and talk about the differences between dyeing yarn and sock blanks and see how things turn out. But before I jump in and tell you more, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Cindy. Cindy, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. Today we're gonna dye Knit Picks Hawthorne fingering weight yarn in both like the yarn form and a sock blank. All of the yarn is 80% superwash fine Highland wool, 20% polyamide, which is like a nylon. Now sock blank is a knit piece of fabric. This one is double stranded. So there's two strands of yarn held together and knit all the way down. So we know that one end of our skein is at one end of the blank, the other is at the other. So if we get any kind of gradient, we'll have gradient yarn in the end. Now our skein of yarn is a circle. So if we were to dye this one a gradient with one color at one end, one color at the other, because it's a loop, that color progression would repeat multiple times throughout the project. I'm gonna go ahead and pop a little zip tie onto here. So even before we go ahead and like glaze the yarn or do anything, there are inherent differences in the types of yarns we're gonna end up when we dye this because of the technique of having the yarn in a blank itself. One other difference is because the blanks are knit, there is going to be some resist from the stitches itself. Some dye may be able to get all the way through and we won't see it, but other dyes sometimes will strike more to the outside of the fabric versus going in between the yarn where there's a little bit of tension. And so oftentimes you get some mottling, or what I like to call reverse speckling, when you dye blanks. And I think this inherent resist in here is one reason why I'm curious about glazing both of them, just to see what we end up with. Now the best way to do this comparison with glazing and experiment would probably be to glaze over white, and maybe that's something I'll do at some point. Probably not today, but maybe that's something I should do at some point. And so that could be a logical follow-up, but instead I want to dye the yarn a base color first, just for fun. But before we get started, I'm gonna go ahead and pre-soak all of our yarn and blanks in some plain tap water for at least 30 minutes with no acid in there yet. We will be dyeing the yarn with acid dyes, so we'll need to add acid eventually, but I like to wait because that gives me flexibility with the technique I wanna do. I have not yet decided what color I'm gonna use for our glaze. If I wanna use, I'm considering either dark navy or royal purple, or maybe a blend of the two. Really, that's gonna depend on the color we have on our base. And for our base, I'm gonna start with two colors. We have two primaries. We have deep magenta and Caribbean blue. Now, deep magenta is a color that will strike quickly and is a color that you can use for glazing itself. Caribbean blue is a color that does not strike quickly. It is a color that is more likely to spread, and we're more likely to get more of that color throughout our yarn. And so I picked this combination, A, because I think it'll be beautiful to glaze on top of, but B, because I think the difference between the pigments we have here is going to potentially show us some cool things on our blank versus our yarn. But I don't want to use too much of these colors today because I want there to still be enough contrast between the base layer of our yarn and the color that we glaze, airbrush with it over. Because if we mix these colors and we can get a beautiful Crayola blue color, if we have that very saturated on the yarn and then we glaze over it even with a black, it's going to be present but really hard to see. So I'm going for more bright, medium to maybe even slightly pastel leaning, but not too pastel because I still want contrast from these colors with the pastel of the color we're going to glaze with. So that's my brain right now. Okay, my plan is to measure out, and I'm going to be using these tablespoon measuring spoons, but I'm going to measure out 15 milliliters of dye twice, because 1 tablespoon is 15 milliliters. The deep magenta, I need to mix it up more. These are both 1% stock solutions. So there was 1 gram of dye dissolved in 100 milliliters of liquid. Deep Magenta is not as good at staying in a stock solution. It can crash out a little bit, so it's just worth keeping in mind. Now I'm planning on filling up these cups a little bit more. It's okay if the total amount of dye is not perfectly even. You can see I'm not measuring the amount of water. I'm just eyeballing it to about there. And similarly, rinsing it off. I would say, maybe I have a little over 200 milliliters of water in each cup. But my plan of just increasing the volume, and the reason why it's not important how specific it is, my plan is to distribute this color all over our yarn, and so by increasing the volume, it's going to make it easier to spread out. I have 2 shoe boxes here because I like dyeing yarn in shoe boxes. It's just a nice, easy way to set something up to process slowly. Okay, in this one container, I'm adding the 200 grams of yarn. And then the other, I'm gonna add the sock blanks. But you know what just occurred to me as I add the sock blanks in? When it goes time to do the glazing step, there's so much less surface area with our sock blanks than there is with like the skeins. And so, ooh, should I use the exact same amount of dye or less dye? Ooh, I don't know. And that's gonna be a hard decision. Now, we have 200 grams of yarn in each container, right? 8 cups of water, no added acid yet. But this one, because the yarn is less compact, since it's not knit, the yarn is taking up more of the area than it is over here. But let's go ahead. We're gonna do the pink first. So I'm gonna add the pink dye on and then immediately work it through. This is because this is a color that can, strike quickly, and you can see how much it's moving down on the blanks. Since this is a color that has the potential to strike quickly, I wanted to make sure to distribute it before we go into our next color, which is our Caribbean blue. And you know what? Let's go ahead and do 2 tablespoons of white vinegar now. Just this way so I don't blend things 100% completely. And I can give this just like a little massage. Okay, my hands are very pink. Because I'm not going to want to move things quite as much once I add the blue. Let's do the yarn first. It's all yarn, and so some of it's going to go to the other side, and that is okay. We'll have varying amounts of pink left. There could be some white on the bottom. All of that is okay. I'm trying here to focus on adding it near this particular side. There we go. And some of it is going to move, and I have to be okay with that. And I need to go rinse my hands before I drip. And actually, I can see along the bottom here of the blanks that some of that blue has gone underneath the pink. And so that may stay that way. It may change. We're just gonna have to be patient and see, but it's because there's more space for things to move through. Let's do 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar down on our blue end. Just and gently work it through. just to give us our base layer. Okay. And you know, we may end up losing all that pink, just having purple. So maybe that'll help dictate what color we go ahead and do on the next layer. But now I'm in a little bit of a pickle, just because I want to be able to move these, and that's definitely not going to happen yet. Because I know when I go ahead and lift this, the dyes are going to shift and move, and that is not what I want to happen. I want things to kind of stay where they are. And we have a lot of acid in here now, so I know that if I let things sit for a little while, at least then we'll have a better chance of preserving some of this that we have right here, right now. So I'm gonna go ahead and wait 30 minutes before I move it. Because even though the Caribbean blue is a color that will spread and move all around, I do have experience with it where it'll kind of, some of it will stick to the yarn right away. So I'll see you in 30 minutes. We still have a lot of color in here. I think less over in this container just because there's more surface area, so it's easier, I guess, for the dye to hit yarn and therefore get absorbed. So I'm gonna go ahead and pop the lids on and very carefully take these to the side. I want to try to avoid shifting it as much as possible, but it will move some. There's not much I can do because I need my counter to do other projects. I'm more worried about moving the blanks. But anyway, I will see you in a couple of days. A squirrel is watching me through the window. That's kind of hilarious. In each of my dye pots, I have 24 cups of water. And I'm gonna add, okay, this is over 300 milliliters, maybe closer to 350. Maybe 325 milliliters of white vinegar. Basically, this is a 300 milliliter beaker, but I'm filling it up past the 300 millimeter mark. After a lot of self-debate, I decided to use dark navy for the glaze. And we'll see the yarn in a little bit. It is just about 24 hours later. And I'm gonna measure out 50 milliliters of our dark navy dye, and I'm going to add it to each pot. I considered using less for the sock blanks, but you know what? We're going to go for it. Now, clearly we have a difference here in our pots. One is 8 quart, the other is 12. So this could make a difference in the shape of the liquid and how things heat up, but I can't really control for that. Besides buying another container, which I'm not gonna do because I've been using these 2 dye pots for a very long time. But now I didn't entirely think this through. Okay, let's go over to the sink and look at our cold process yarn. I just hadn't considered how I was gonna set all this up on my counter. Okay, so it's the next day. I should rotate this so they look the same. And you can see that almost all of the color is in our sock blanks and in our yarn. Now, if we were going to take a look at the sock blank, we have our blue. We go through this section of like a mottled purple color, and then we go through our pink as well. And if I look at the pinkest pink section and I pull it apart, I do see there's going to be mottling, but there is pink in between the stitches. Maybe in this middle area, yes. When I pull it apart here, I feel more pastels in the middle where we had less color. And then over with our blue, we do have some little pastel areas. I don't know how in focus I am and how much you can see, but see how there's areas in there that are lighter than the darker blue. This is not something that's going to be changing with the glaze, but we may see the glaze hit more to the outside of the blanks then we do the inside. So what I'm going to do for the yarn is I'm going to squeeze out not all the water, but most of the water, and set this on my countertop. I'll try to hold these out before I put them in, just so you can get a view. And as for our yarn, interesting, there's a hint of pink left in there and not in the other. You can see we have pastels in there. Not a lot of the intermediate purple. That is one thing I've realized from this technique, that I don't blend the colors too much in the middle. So it's mostly blue and pink. I realize I really should give you a sense of what these look like before we add the glaze, and how the little amount of purple on both is very, very similar. Now, if we compare this blank that I have on top to the one beneath it, there are differences, but they are very similar. Like, for example, this one has some purple more at the end, the other one doesn't. But when we unravel one of them into 250-gram balls of yarn, we're going to get a matched set. And so, I guess this is our canvas that we're working with. Now, the process for the glaze itself is pretty simple. I'm going to come over to the pot, take a deep breath. I'm going to add our yarn, raise it up, lower it down, sort of wiggle it through, and now I'm not going to touch it anymore. I move it through so that way, in theory, some of the dye can access all of the yarn, but if I move it too much, then we'll bring the dye into the middle. I'm going to bring this to the stove to start heating it. In my experience, it takes around an hour to do this well. Now with the sock blanks, I kind of want to hold it, I guess like so. We're going to go in, just holding it from one edge, raise up, lower down, and leave it. I have no idea how this will work because we have less surface area, but I'm also going to take this over to the stove and start heating it up. I am using my experience here with the amount of acid and blue dye that I should use per 100 grams. I think in the past, maybe I would do a gram of dark navy dye for 400 grams of yarn, but maybe in the pot I would have 32 cups of water. So I'm hoping that this should work because I've seen similar things work in the past. Now I'm gonna go ahead and set my timer for 60 minutes because also from experience, it takes about 30 minutes to heat up the pot full of cool water. And then it takes another 30 minutes to get that 30 minutes of heat. Now, one thing I would like to explore again in the future is doing a hot glaze, where I have a hot dye bath set up with our dye, add the yarn, remove it, and then maybe steam set to finish setting the color. That is something that I'm interested potentially in exploring again someday, but this has been working. The one question is that if I add the yarn to the hot dye bath, the color will strike faster, so probably we'll get more contrast between the glaze and what's in the middle. But also I find because sometimes the color strikes so fast that it's really uneven versus feeling like there's still tonal variation between the glaze, but feeling like I can get coverage all over the yarn versus just on a portion. So we'll see how it goes. I'll see you in about an hour. It's been an hour. And I can say that the dye bath on our non-blank yarn did clear first, but I believe both of them have cleared. Okay, I'm gonna turn off the heat. Sometimes just holding the zip ties out for a moment makes it easier to lift up. Ooh, ooh, I see our glaze all over on both the blue and the pink. I'll give you a closer look once things are less steamy. But oh, I love it. And you can see the dye bath is clear. Okay, here are our blanks. Now removing these is a little bit trickier just because there's not like a convenient way to pull it up. So I'll try to grab it and then wrap it around. I am definitely seeing some glaze in here. I can't wait to pull apart the stitches and really take a look at it. What I can't tell is if some of the areas are feeling like substantially darker here than they do in the other one. Ooh, but you see like how you feel like you see the color under another color? Oh, beautiful. There's maybe like a tiny hint of color left, but almost all of it is in our yarn. So I'm gonna let everything cool so then we can wash it and take a closer look. Color-wise, things are looking pretty similar to me in the very steamy side. As we go to wash our sock blanks and our yarn, I'm not even gonna bother cleaning out the beautiful glaze right now. I'll wait till we are dry. I'm gonna add a little bit of dish soap. This worked so well. Oh, I can see it now. And one reason why I'm waiting to go ahead and do the full close-up, I mean, I'll do it once everything's washed, I suppose. And there's no color bleeding, thank goodness. But once the yarn is dry, the contrast between the under layer and the glaze layer will be that much bigger. But anyway, I am washing our cooled off yarn in just some cool water with a little bit of dish soap. And oh my gosh, I'm about to pop it in the spin dryer to spin out some more liquid to help things dry faster. But oh my God, you are not in focus. You can't see the glory that we have. And then I'm gonna also have to decide if I'm gonna unravel one of the blanks in this video. But oh my gosh, I don't know if it's even coming through right now. It's just beautiful. And so now, again, into the spin dryer we go, then I'll hang it up to dry and we'll take a closer look. But the navy on the Caribbean blue especially, oh, I love it, I love it, I love it. Even just out of the spin dryer, you can see the glaze. Some of them have started to unravel a tiny bit. You could add a safety line, which would be adding a strand through all of these live stitches to prevent the unraveling. But like less than a yard unraveled isn't a big deal to me, but oh, so pretty. Here is all of the yarn that we dyed. And I would say color for color, on the blank, we have a few patches that are like dark navy, like here, here, here. There's one way down there. But overall, the blues we feel here and the pinks feel very similar. Let's zoom in on the glaze, that airbrush quality where you feel like, for example, right here, we have that navy, but it feels like you can almost see through it. Because it's, I mean, it's patchy, right? That's what it is. It gives this shallow, shallow layer. And so it feels more than just the colors are mixed and blended because you have this dimension in here. And you can see it on the blue really well. Also, there is more contrast with the pink. So it's a little bit easier to see there, especially where it is a little bit more saturated. It's just stunning. The glaze presents really well on the sock blanks too, especially even in the heavy areas. You can really see that blue peeking through. And if I pull it apart, you do see you have those light areas with very little to no navy. Those are going to give a very speckly effect in the end. You're going to have those light speckles on the mostly dark backdrop. And then we feel it over the pink as well, and we also will have some of those lighter speckles, but you can see you've got just that really light layer of color. A little bit of yarn has unraveled from one of the blanks near the end, and you can see that we have this sort of very subtle but regular repeat of the like navy and not navy. I don't know if that's showing up well on camera. I think it'll show up better once I unravel a little more. Okay, but over here you can see we've got this brighter pink at a little bit of regular intervals from the knit stitches. So the thing that's leaving me torn right now is the indecision if I'm going to unravel one of the blanks, which I think I am. But I think before I do that, I am going to go ahead and twist up these full skeins, because I can always go ahead and untwist one in the end to show that alongside with the yarn. I unravel from the blank if I do that. It does feel a little funny for me to lay the yarn on the blank like this because normally when I do this, it's yarn that I've unraveled for a blank versus a colorway dyed, really a different technique because it was a skein versus a blank, but just to show the color depth. And I mean, gorgeous, gorgeous. I unraveled one of the blanks and the color progression is gorgeous. From far away, you could really feel the reverse speckling a bit, but when I zoom in, you see it more. The yarn has a speckly feel. It's gonna feel mottled, quite different from the color progressions that we have in the full skein. And just as a reminder, I'll pop up what it looked like before I twisted it, but we don't have any evidence of any of the modeling in here. Yes, there is gonna still be some modeling because the glaze is uneven, but the modeling on the unraveled sock blank is a lot more regular because of the way the stitches are put in there, if that makes sense. And without question, the navy is glazed. It's just a different feeling because it's not all over. If I zoom in on the end of the nitty knotty, you can see how the reverse speckles over here are more blue and the reverse speckles over here are more pink, showing that our original colors did go through the yarn a lot more than our glaze did. The glaze struck so fast that it left a lot of that original color in there. So pretty. Cindy, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really hope that you found this video informative and that you love the yarn that I dyed for you. If you want to learn more about how you can become a lab partner like Cindy, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. And if you have a particular video idea or request, please reach out to me ahead of time so that way we can discuss what is feasible for me to create, and then we're both on the same page before you check out. Cindy, thank you again. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I have already filmed the other project I said I was going to, where I glazed, again, a hawthorn sock blank and hawthorn fingering weight yarn with a single color, just to then see how that will come out. I haven't unraveled anything yet, but that video is currently in progress. And one thing I love about my whole process is that as I'm working on one project, I have so many ideas that come up along the way, and it helps, I guess, future videos write themselves. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. How might you go about this type of project if you wanted to create a gradient but not have the reverse speckling in there? Well, I would dye a bunch of connected mini skeins, blending the pink and the blue together, and then glaze that bundle. That would give you a glaze that feels more like we have over here, while still giving you a gradient like what we have shown here. Thank you so much for watching.